Mark, I'd like to invite you to do your presentation. Mark Daniels from Social Traders, everyone.
My name's Mark Daniels. I'm from Social Traders, and we're a social enterprise development organisation. Do you have a clicker, or do you need what I need to just?
I'm the clicker.
You're the clicker. Awesome. Can you click, please? And click again. Okay, and my organisation is really a firm believer that the market can deliver social outcomes. Traditionally, we sort of say the market does lots of great engine room creativity and the creation of wealth, but it also creates problems that the not-for-profit and government solve. We actually think the market's very good at driving positive externalities. It just needs to be geared to do that. And we think the greatest vehicles for achieving positive outcomes through the marketplace currently are social enterprises. So that's an underlying philosophy for social traders. We grew up in Victoria as an organisation. We started in 2009. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about us later and some of what we do. But we're also now delivering in New South Wales, and we have a whole range of national programs. So you may have heard about the Crunch, which is a social enterprise development. It's an incubator program, it's 6 months, and it takes a concept, a really strong social enterprise concept that we think will be ready for finance within 6 to 12 months. And runs it through a business planning process. So it develops, tests the idea, and then it develops a business plan that's investable basically. So it comes up with a product that then goes to investors. And then we continue to work with those people after they've got an investment as well. So I'm just citing that because it's something you may be aware of. We pushed out and promoted it across New South Wales in the last half of last year, and we have cohorts starting next week, 8 social enterprises from Sydney. But we do 5 different things in our organisation. So we help people to learn about social enterprise, so we introduce people to the idea. We have tools and resources on our website that can, and videos that make it easy to understand what a social enterprise is, for you to start to explore a social enterprise idea. We help people start a social enterprise, so the Crunch is a really good example of that, but we've got an online tool called the Social Enterprise Builder, where you can actually go online and use it, and people have built social enterprises just using our online tool without talking to us about it. We help people to grow their social enterprises, so we've got tools and resources that we've developed that help people to take an existing social enterprise and win more customers, for example. So we have a product called Social Enterprise Finder, which is an online resource with social enterprises listed on it. And if you're a social enterprise, you can just list yourself on it and you can be found. We get 50 or 60 people a day using the Finder to find social enterprises. We've got a shop for social enterprise products called Good Spender. And so any social enterprise can list on Good Spender and put their products up online. And we're doing a lot of work around procurement, which is the buy from social enterprise piece. So we're working with corporates and government to unlock their spending and link it up with social enterprises directly. So for us, the scale of impact in social enterprise can be huge when you get the state government buying from you, or you get a corporate, like Lend-Lease or Westpac or Mirvac or someone like that buying from you, which traditionally they don't buy from social enterprises. They would even exclude social enterprises from their tender processes. And lastly, we invest in social enterprise. So we have a social enterprise investment fund, have one for 4 or 5 years, and we invest traditionally in startups that we work with, but we're starting to look at other ways of opening that fund up to other people as well. So that's just a real snapshot of our organisation. We're not massive, we're about 15 people. We've got our first employee in New South Wales at the moment, so we're starting to sort of grow our footprint in other places, but a lot of what we do is national because it's digital as well. Okay, this is what I'm going to run you through for the next 20 odd minutes. And there's probably 5 people in the room could have delivered something similar to you, and I've been talking about this stuff for 15 years. I used to run social enterprises. I used to enable social enterprises. I used to work on a public housing estate where we stimulated a whole range of social enterprise activities. And we've created some beautiful social enterprises still running 15 years later, which is really exciting. And then I ran social enterprises at the Brotherhood of St Lawrence in Victoria, which is a large not-for-profit organisation. And then 7 years ago we started Social Traders, and I came and started working for Social Traders, and that was really to enable social enterprises to grow in Australia, which is our fundamental mission. So what is a social enterprise? Click. Okay. We did a piece of research with the Queensland University of Technology in 2009-10. It was called Phases. And it's kind of exciting because we're doing phases again right now with the same academic, Jo Barraquette, except she's at Swinburne in Melbourne now. But Phases was the first attempt to map social enterprise in Australia. And Phases stands for Finding Australia's Social Enterprise Sector. So in 2009, we didn't know anything about the social enterprise sector in Australia. We knew there were cooperatives, and they're all publicly listed organisations. But beyond that, we were guessing at how big they were, where they existed, what sorts of things they did, who they benefited, what industries they operated in. We didn't know any of that sort of stuff. So for us, Phases, and Phases on our website, so if you're interested, you can download a copy. It's been downloaded 15,000 times, so it's been a really useful resource. But what it did was it tried to, one, define social enterprise and then map it. You can have the next slide, please. And the definition that we used is internationally comparable. So this is a definition of social enterprise that will make sense in the UK, in Canada, the US, and other jurisdictions as well. And we've been using it for 5 years, and a number of government departments have adopted this definition over that time. So there are 4 key elements in social enterprise. They're led by an economic, social, cultural and environmental mission consistent with public or community benefit. The last 4 words are the most important ones. They are driven by public or community benefit as opposed to personal profit. That's fundamentally the driver. They have a social mission or purpose. They trade to fulfil their mission, so they're not just, I don't want to trivialise, not-for-profit organisations who get government funding, but they're not government-funded institutions or organisations per se. They sell stuff. They sell stuff into a competitive marketplace, and trade is the majority of the income coming into their organisation. And finally, the last element is an interesting one, because it says, the term is reinvest the majority of their profit or surplus in the fulfilment of their mission. If you're a not-for-profit, you reinvest all of your profits into your mission. You have to. That's the nature of it, being a not-for-profit. But what we're touching on here is that social enterprise doesn't have to be a not-for-profit organisation. It can be a for-profit structure. In fact, you'll choose the company structure that makes sense in delivering the mission that you're seeking to achieve. So sometimes you do have to raise capital using share floats, and sometimes you have to do, the owner might have a personal stake in the business. But the majority, for it to be a social enterprise by our definition, they have to reinvest the majority of the profits, so 51% plus has to go into the mission for which they were established. And I guess, this is a useful distinction between a social enterprise and traditional delivery of services through social programs. And this is really important to get your head around. That social enterprises, social programs, you tend to get lots of money and you deliver lots of outputs and you deliver it very quickly and then the money ends. So it's high impact, short period of time, no sustainability attached to it. So if you get $100,000 and you say, I can create 10 jobs for that, you'll create 10 jobs. When the money stops, so will the activity. But in social enterprise, it's not about high impact, burn bright and die. It's about building a robust business over an extended period of time. So quite often you won't deliver huge social benefits in your first year as a social enterprise, although you could. It's actually about having a 5 or a 10 or a 15-year view of where you're going as a social enterprise. It's not something you put your toe in for a year. It's something you basically, starting a small business, that's effectively what you do when you're starting a social enterprise. And if you start your business and end it within 2 years, you'll probably achieve very little social impact, and you probably won't make any money either. So, if you look at typical small businesses, they break even at about year 3 or year 5, thereabouts. That's the sort of thing we're talking about with social enterprise. And we're never heavy on the organisations that we invest in. We kind of go, we'll really measure your success beyond 5 years, because that's when you'll really start to deliver the greatest impact your organisation will deliver. And maybe at 15 years or 20 years, you'll really hit your straps as well. I don't think it's about being short-sighted, and that's the point I really want to make. They burn long, and they burn deep, and they deliver social benefits for their whole life, and they can have long lives as opposed to social programs which burn bright and die. This is a really instrumental concept that I think people need to understand. In fact, we go to social enterprises that are 5 and 10 years old. One that was 30 years old, we spent quite a bit of time on, that was turning over 10 million, and we said, what is the motivation of your social enterprise? And they had never thought about what the motivation of it, well, they had, but they had mixed ideas about what the motivation of their business was. This is probably the single most important concept to understand when you're starting a social enterprise, apart from the fact that you're running a business. And that is why you're doing it. And I've spent my many years where people said to me, I want to set up a cafe in the poorest area of Victoria, which is where I'm from. So, you know, the highest CFA index, disadvantage, and with the profit, and I want to employ locals who are long-term unemployed, and with the profits we're going to start up a social enterprise incubator. And I said, well, one, no one in your community wants to buy coffee because they're all poor and they can't afford to pay $4 for the coffee that you want to sell, which means there won't be any jobs necessarily generated out of your business, and there certainly won't be profits for a social enterprise incubator. Why don't you try setting up a cafe in that affluent community over there, and then maybe, if you've got all the right business fundamentals, you start to be able to employ some of the disadvantaged people that you want to benefit, and maybe one day you'll make really good profits and you'll be able to do something creative. But in all likelihood, just creating employment for that cohort will be a great outcome, or making a profit that you reinvest in great activities will be a great outcome. So everyone wants to do everything originally, and then we spend our time going, well, no, what's the thing you really, really want to do? And so we think we've distilled it to 3 things. We think employment and training and support for marginalised groups is a key motivation. Okay, and you know the social enterprises, the big issue is probably the best example. These are Victorian ones, but you know, I know there's ones in New South Wales that bread and butter was referred to before, lentils, anything employs as well. But the big issue is another one that's equally, that's why they exist, for this reason. The second one, let me go to the third one actually, this is an easy one to explain. Social enterprises, most large not-for-profits in Australia will have social enterprises attached to them that exist to generate profits for their business. So for these organisations, they are interested only in making money, and they want to make millions of dollars in these businesses so they can reinvest that into social programs. And the biggest examples that you'll all know are the Salvation Army and Mission Australia and others who run opportunity shops. Opportunity shops are a great example of profit redistribution social enterprises. They don't deliver a social service directly. Originally they did, they provided low-cost clothing, but fundamentally they exist to make profits which they reinvest into other areas of the organisation. Thank You is another example of that. When you buy their water or their muesli bars or anything like that, the money gets reinvested into water or hygiene or food projects in developing countries. That is another type of social enterprise. The third one is probably the most complex, and that is it's products and services in direct response to a community need not met by the marketplace. So this is where a social enterprise gets established because the market isn't responding to a need. So things like community buyouts, buying a petrol station. Bendigo Community Bank's a really interesting example of this. You know, there aren't banks in our town, we want banks in our town, we want all the employment that banks create, we want our local wealth, and we want that wealth to stay in our local community, so we're setting up a social enterprise. Community childcare. So, you know, when ABC got taken over by Good Start, that's a really interesting example of community need driving a social enterprise. So it's a really interesting response to a market failure. That's fundamentally the driver. Just a couple of examples. One's from New South Wales here, it's a cracker, it's resource recovery. One, we run Social Enterprise Awards. They won Social Enterprise of the Year in 2013. And they are a transfer station in Foster Tuncurry. They have some challenging Indigenous issues in that community. The setup that they've got, their business, is the largest employer of Indigenous people in the region, and nearly everyone they employ that's Indigenous is an ex-offender exiting the justice system. They come into their business, and so basically what they do is they employ these people and they train them to run a tip shop and a recycling site. So they're using a contract with local government and people's waste to create jobs for Indigenous people exiting the justice system. It's a stunning example, and in 22 years they've only ever had one person go back into jail who started working with them. And we're talking about tens and tens and tens of people who have been into their employment as a result of that. So it's a stunning outcome. It turns over about $2 or $3 million a year, so a really interesting example of that first bucket that I'm talking about around employment creation. This is a second one, we call them buckets. So bucket 2, responding to a need. This is called Connecting Up. We're just profiling award winners that we've had in the past. They won a Social Enterprise of the Year award, and they did something really interesting. They have a partnership with Microsoft and Cisco and all of these companies who produce software, and they sell it into the not-for-profit sector at a discounted rate. And over the last 20 years, they've saved over $50 million in the not-for-profit sector because of the price at which they sell those products into the sector. So they're saving the not-for-profit sector huge amounts of money by providing a service that wouldn't be able, that they wouldn't have access to otherwise. And the last one is Thank You Water. And if you haven't heard of Thank You Water, Google these guys. Are absolutely stunning. Their marketing is superb. But these guys was started by two 19-year-olds who are now husband and wife. They're now 26, I think. And they went on a gap year to Cambodia and a few other developing countries and were staggered by the fact that that people didn't have access to fresh water. So 900 million people in the world don't have access to fresh water, and in Australia we all have access to fresh water, but we drink bottled water. The irony was staggering for them. And so they said, we're going to start a bottled water company, and all of the profits from our business will go to third world water aid projects to bring fresh water to people in developing countries. And these guys have done stunningly well because they had no money at all. Their main competition is Coca-Cola, so Mount Franklin is owned by Coca-Cola. And they managed, using social media, to get first into Australia Post retail stores, then into 7-Eleven. Last year they got into Coles and Woolworths, and this year I think they're reinvesting $1.5 million into water aid projects in developing countries. And they don't just have water now, they've got muesli bars, soaps and a whole range of things. So they're a stunning example of just making lots of money and reinvesting it in the mission for which they were established in the first place. I want to just hammer these points, and Sujit asked me to, but this was a presentation I always give anyway, so there is no difference here. A successful social enterprise is firstly a good business. If you don't have a good business, it doesn't matter how good your mission is, you will not live beyond the money that you receive to start your business. And no one will invest in you unless you have a good business idea. I cannot hammer it enough. We say no. We had 150 people apply for the Chrome this year, and we took 18. So there was 132 ideas that we didn't think would ever get to commerciality, where they could find customers and be sustainable businesses. And so all the rules of small business apply. It's about quality of the product or service. No one will excuse the quality of your product or service because you're a social enterprise. My rule is I'll give you one chance. And some people have never met my one chance rule, So if the coffee's cold the first time, I'll buy it a second time. And I'm pretty lenient because I live in this world of social enterprise. I want them to succeed, but I don't forgive mistakes too often. It's just not acceptable. And a consumer definitely won't forgive mistakes on a regular basis. They have to understand their market, so they have to prove to us if we invest in them, but I'm just using us as an example, they have to find customers, they have to know who their customers are, and they have to understand who their competitors are, and have to deal with their competitors and have strategies for dealing with their competitors. And they have to have strategies for finding their customers and making them buy their product. Price, promotion. Obviously, these, you can't be more expensive because you're a social enterprise. Maybe, we've done research, consumers might pay up to 5 or 10% more. That's it. And if the quality is not excellent, they definitely won't do that. And promotion. These are the business 101. And so they start based on market opportunities. So you can't believe that you can just build it and they will come. So that's a common theme that we have to deal with. We've got this great business idea, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to start producing, gift cards now, or birthday cards, and we kind of go, why is anyone going to buy from you? You haven't done any research into this. Is there a need in the marketplace for the product or service that you're actually developing? And there's only a couple of examples where actually being a social enterprise, so quite often being a social enterprise makes you less financially sustainable, particularly if you're one of those employment-based ones. But even if you're coming in where, so that was the bucket one, but the bucket two is where there's a market failure. So the market can't make money, and you're trying to make money in that marketplace. You won't get the sort of profits that private businesses get, generally speaking. And, there are ways around it. You can have volunteers and all of those sorts of things, but basically, they tend to be less profitable businesses, and the only exceptions to that are where your whole model is based on your social values. So you wouldn't buy the big issue if you weren't buying from a homeless person. So that business works because it's an experience of something unique and disadvantaged. And community buyout only works because the community can actually see value in keeping that asset. So it's more likely to succeed when the whole community supports it, as opposed to when it's a privately owned business. So there are some examples. Okay, where is social enterprise at? I'll move through this relatively quickly. Cheers. I just want to give you a snapshot of social enterprise in Australia, just put them all up. So there's an estimated 20,000 social enterprises in Australia. That's what came out of our phases research. It's pretty significant. 20,000, not 20,000 sites. So St Benny's counts as one, their op shops. So does Salvation Army's op shops. So there are 20,000 of these businesses. The number's grown at a rate of 37% over the past 5 years. So they're growing rapidly. 73% have existed for at least 5 years and 62% are over 10 years. So it's not an immature space. Everyone thinks that social enterprise is new. It's not new. It's been around for hundreds of years. A friend of mine says since Babylonian times, so that's a lot of history. But the term has really only come into usage in the last 10 to 15 years. That's the new part of this stuff. They operate in all markets. So we surveyed 350 social enterprises as part of phases, and they operated in every industry, including mining. 39% of all income in the not-for-profit sector is earned through trading activity. About 22 billion per annum is earned through sales in the not-for-profit sector. We are the third most enterprising not-for-profit sector in the world. We have social enterprise in the DNA of the not-for-profit sector in Australia. And we estimate that social enterprise activity is 2 to 3% of GDP. So it's not something that could easily be ignored. It's significant. There is growing interest. I always look at this last dot point and sort of giggle. It ebbs and flows, the interest in social enterprise. It's not a bad place. 15 years ago, there was no money for social enterprise. There was no particular philanthropic engagement around it. It has grown. It just plateaus at times, and different states take the lead at different points. And this is just some of the graphs that came out of phases. The mixture of small, medium and large businesses almost mirrors small, medium and large for private companies in Australia. So, they're no different. There are no barriers to growth for social enterprises that are any different to the barriers to growth that private businesses face. And this is all of the industries in Australia, and it's just showing that, social enterprises operate in all these industries. These slides will be available, by the way, so if you can't read it properly, you'll get it later. Cheers. Okay, I just want to tell you a little bit about social traders quickly. So that was sort of a bit about social enterprise. Click on. This is what we do, and I talked about the builder before. So this is an online business planning tool. It goes from what is a social enterprise right up to a complete business plan. So we created it so that anyone could access it, and it's had heavy use from WA, interestingly. So it's a national platform, and you can just go in for free, and you can use the Builder as a framework to help you build some of your social enterprise thinking. The other thing we have, and I referred to this before, and ignore the applications open timelines, is the Crunch. So the Crunch is starting in New South Wales this year, but even for the last 2 years we've had New South Wales participants in the Crunch. And basically it's an opportunity to start a new social enterprise. So you can be really what we're looking for is not people who are currently running social enterprises. We're looking for people with a really strong concept. And if you currently run a social enterprise, then it would have to be a new business arm. That's what we're looking for. And what we do with you over a period of 6 months with business mentors, with our own staff on the ground working with you and giving you direct support, is we run workshops, bring you together, and we progress your business plan over that period of time. So you get to the point where you prove that it'll be a feasible business, then you do the business plan, and then you pitch to us as an investor, and we bring other investors into the room as well. And we've invested in about 12 who have been through the Crunch in 4 years, which doesn't sound like a high number, but another 8 or 10 have got investment from other vehicles as well. So it's about 25-ish who have got investment as a result of going through the Crunch, which means there's a total expectation that they'll execute and live on. We've only had one who's not continued to operate in that period of time. Okay, and the other thing I was touching on before, we have something called the Finder, the Social Enterprise Finder, and I said that's a free online resource. If you run a social enterprise, you can put your social enterprise onto the Finder. It's just a directory of social enterprises. It's got 5,500 listings of social enterprises on it. So if you want to buy from a social enterprise, it's not a bad place to go as well. This is something we started in November last year. It's an online shop for social enterprise products. So it's like eBay for social enterprise, I guess, if you wanted to have an analogy. We've got 40 social enterprises listed on it. We've got over 1,000 products. Over Christmas, I think we had 35,000 visits to the website, and it only started in November. So if you are a social enterprise and you have products, you can list on this website and sell through this website, and you don't have to pay. You pay if you sell something. So we take 10% of food items or 15% of products. It's an amazing partnership we've got with Australia Post. And if you want to buy from a social enterprise, this is definitely the place to go. It's got an amazing range of products. And the last thing we're developing at the moment is something that links social enterprises directly to buyers, to businesses, large corporations, and to government. And so we're in the development mode. We've got 5 organisations who are signing on as buyers, and we're starting to certify social enterprises on the other side, and then the matching process will begin in terms of finding out the needs of those corporates and government organisations and finding social enterprises that can service those needs. And the last thing I really want to touch on is something we're launching today, which is, it's not a new launch, this is our 3rd Social Enterprise Awards. I showed you 3 that won Social Enterprise Awards in 2013. If you run a social enterprise and you think it's pretty good, come please apply for an award. If you know of people who run great social enterprises, please tell them about the awards. The prize this year is actually to get profiled in the Guardian website or newspaper. So it's we've given away money in the past, but what we really want to do through the awards is raise the profile of social enterprise. And I don't think any social entrepreneur would not want to be a news article on a mainstream press publication that gets 1 million visits a day, which would be a fantastic outcome in terms of sales and opportunity. The other thing we're doing is running a conference in Melbourne called the Social Enterprise Masters. We ran that last year. Yep. Oh gosh, I thought you were telling me it was time. Okay, because it is. And the Social Enterprise Masters, a 1-day conference on the 3rd of June in Melbourne, and I'll make sure Suji shares that with you. But it's actually profiling past winners from the awards, so it's learning from people who have been held up, I guess, as demonstration of excellence in social enterprise in Australia. And I will stop now and take a breath, and hopefully you might have a question or two. We've probably got a few minutes to take a few questions from the audience. I guess we're just speaking loud, so if you can say it loud.
I'll speak loud. Mark, thank you. That was... Okay.
I can hear.
Thanks. That was fascinating, and thank you so much. My question is this: if you look, this is about the potential for social enterprise. If you look on in Australia, the current economic, social, political environment on one side, and on the other side, the level of public awareness and interest. How would you view the potential for the growth of this, the whole broad sector of social enterprise, including co-ops and all those other...
It's a great question. We did some research with Australia Post. They partnered with us to create the Good Spender website, and we asked their consumer panels, because companies like Australia Post have consumer panels that they ask questions of. And we asked them what their understanding of social enterprise was, because we were trying to name Good Spender, and we wondered if we should have social enterprise in the title. And the level of recognition of the term social enterprise was under 3%. People didn't understand what a social enterprise was, and usually they thought it had something to do with social media. And one person who worked in a social enterprise couldn't explain what a social enterprise was. And when we told them what social enterprises were, they still got confused between pink lids on Mount Franklin bottles with a social enterprise. So for them, women's breast cancer awareness through Mount Franklin was tantamount to a social enterprise. So there is a real lack of understanding in social enterprise in Australia. Conversely, what we also found was that in Australia, there are 10% of the population buy products and services based on values. So they're the people who will look for an environmental tick somewhere on a product. They'll buy fair trade. They'll buy anything they can that has a values alignment with them as an individual. And 40% of people in Australia are called leaners. So they're the leaders, and the leaners are people who would buy based on values if they had the information there. So I guess what I'm touching on is probably where you're going with this. 50% of Australians care about what products and services they buy and the value that is delivered through those products and services. So there is definitely an appetite for social enterprise, even though there's no recognition of what social enterprise is. And then the other element, I guess, is the eco-political environment. I don't think there's ever been a bad environment for social enterprise. We've been funded by Conservatives and by Labor. It gets bipartisan support, generally speaking. It tends to be about kind of where the government's thinking is at the time, and the fact that the jobs are probably the hottest issue in Australia for the next 2 to 3 years, probably not a bad time for social enterprise necessarily, but it just means the focus of social enterprise dialogue has to move to employment as opposed to probably the other two buckets that we would normally be talking about. I'm not saying that you won't get interest in those other two areas. I'm saying that the government, the greatest level of interest will be in employment and job creation through employment as a vehicle. So I kind of, that's their language now, and it's the way that they're comfortable with measuring things generally in government. Job creation is a really strong measurement tool. I've probably got time for one or two questions if there are any more.
Because of time, we're just limited to one more.
One more?
Does anybody have a question?
Yeah, we've got two. Oh, sorry. I think he's first.
Oh,
but if it's quick, maybe we can take you too. Sorry. I'm around
You
anyway.
can take me anytime.
Yeah. Oh, good. Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you.
By doing the jobs in the community, it would be best to get the community to have confidence in themselves in creating these type of jobs.
Can you say the start of that again? Sorry, I missed it.
Getting jobs in the community is, I find, by creating confidence in the people who are creating these jobs, will make jobs much easier.
Okay.
Because a lot of people where I live, there's a lot of housing commission.
Yep.
And they got no confidence in
Yeah, no. Okay.
By building their confidence up, will give them confidence in moving on. And
Totally agree with you, and it's a great statement. And my background was on public housing estates. I worked on one for 8 years in Fitzroy in Melbourne, high-rise, 800 properties on a 3-hectare site. Social enterprise was the most rewarding work I did during that time. And we managed to create jobs for 40 public housing tenants every year, and then we would pathway them into the open labour market at the end of that. And our jobless rate went from 95% joblessness, which is pretty standard for any public housing community in Australia. You know, you've got people on pensions, age pensions, disability pensions, unemployment benefits. 95% joblessness is standard for public housing. We moved it from 95% joblessness to 81% joblessness over a 4-year period, which was stunning in terms of changing that community. And what was really interesting is the first time we went out to the community with a job in our social enterprise, we knocked on 800 doors across the Fitzroy and Collingwood public housing estate to get 4 applicants, because they didn't believe that we were offering jobs that were embargoed for public housing tenants, because they'd only ever experienced the opposite, which is we can't apply for jobs, we won't get them. We said, nope, you can get these jobs. And so we got 4 people, they were the wrong people, they weren't job ready, but we did it anyway. They went in, we employed them. The next year, we got a few more applicants. And by the 3rd year, we had 90 applicants for 10 jobs that we were advertising. So the point that you're making is exactly right. As soon as they saw people working in their community who were also public housing tenants who'd been long-term unemployed, they started to believe that this was a genuine pathway out of poverty into mainstream economic participation. So it was really exciting for those people. And we didn't have to do any advertising after that. We had lists of people who wanted to work for us, basically. So totally agree with you. You're giving people the tools. If they can see people work in their community, it changes the mindset of the community. It's bold. Thank you. One more.
Hi, my name is Vicky. I'm on the board of Alison Road Community Centre. One of the things that I'd like to learn more about is the UK social enterprise model.
Yep.
And from what I understand, one of the first runs that they have is they have very specific business registration, social enterprise registration. Yep. What we have here is cooperatives that has some gaps in it for the purposes of running social enterprises, and the incorporation association, which is even worse. So my question is, what is Social Traders doing around trying to get better legislation around that then gives us better access to developing and running social enterprises?
And I'll try and do this quickly. So there is a group of people who are working on company form, and I think there are probably people in the room who are involved in that.
Can I quickly say, there is a webinar tomorrow by Alan Gregg and a bunch of other people, and that information is on that middle desk there. It's at noon tomorrow. So if you'd like to be part of that, they will talk a bit more about social enterprise structures. So there's an entire working group that's actually working on this topic.
Yeah, and I guess a really quick other response would be, there are 2,000 co-ops in Australia, roughly, and there are 20,000 social enterprises. So the most common form is company limited by guarantee, not-for-profit company limited by guarantee. The KICs it's called the Community Interest Company, is the model that's used in the UK. We don't have exactly the same company structures as the UK, so some of the benefits of KICs are in our companies limited by guarantee. The barrier is that you can't raise equity in a company limited by guarantee if it's a not-for-profit company limited by guarantee, which is the standard. Most social enterprises would take that form. And I guess I'm just making the point, we do have limitations, but it isn't the biggest issue. I think the lack of public awareness for us. So we're not chasing that one. There are other people who are chasing that issue and they're trying to push it up the line, and we're focusing on other areas. So our policy interests aren't company forms specifically, although we're really interested in what's going on in that space.
Thank you very much, Mark.
It's a pleasure.